All right, what's good, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the beautiful city of Cape Town. I am just right outside my house, as you can see, and I've been back home for a good couple of weeks already, and I'm still feeling kind of fresh off my most recent trip to Mysore. It's certainly very fresh in my mind, and I thought it would be fun to pop out here on this beautiful evening and tell you guys a little bit about that trip, because I think it's all too common that people will go over and sort of have a very personal experience practicing there and never really find the opportunity to discuss their individual experience in quite a public format like this. And I think, that's all well and good, each to their own. As I said, it is a very personal experience, but that also does leave a lot of room for assumptions to be made. And one of the big conceptions about Mysore is that the type of practice that's available there is this sort of peaking phase of one's practice cycle. So what do I mean by the peaking phase of a practice cycle? That is essentially when your body is in its peak physical condition, and that will usually associate with being in peak mental, emotional, and energetic conditions for making progress in the practice. You might experience noticeable progress on a day-to-day basis and feel that that progress that you're making is appropriate for you. It's not coming because you're just pushing yourself harder and harder and finding it more and more difficult in experience. It actually comes very naturally that you're making progress in this state. And so a lot of the time this peaking phase will just come along with the feeling of being very connected to your body, of feeling strong and light, and finding a certain amount of ease in the asanas, being able to do your sequence in a way which is sort of more fluid and flowing, more efficient. It just comes a little bit easier in general. And then you might also feel that your body is more open, that you're more flexible and able to go deeper into certain movement patterns or do certain asanas that have been challenging for you in a way that feels very natural. And so the peaking phase can be a very rewarding and very enjoyable phase to experience, and the conception that that is how practice is in Mysore is not unfounded. It doesn't come from nowhere. Mysore is, in fact, a very conducive place to having this peaking experience, and it tends to happen naturally to a lot of people. And so from having the experience of going there, feeling, oh, my practice is like this here, and then going back and it's, whatever it is, and then you go back and your practice is like that again, you kind of feel like, okay, so that is how practice is in Mysore. And I've got to tell you that from my experience, and I started going to Mysore probably about 10 years ago, in my experience, the idea that peaking is the only way to practice in Mysore is just not true at all. I've gone through a huge variety of different situations. I've gone through mental and emotional struggles in Mysore. I've gone through physical injury, illness, all sorts of things, and always found myself to be very well supported while practicing in Mysore. And so this past trip that I did was a very interesting one, because I was so excited to get there, and I hadn't been there for a couple of years at this point. I usually go there every year, and I try to go there as soon as the season opens and stay there for as long as I can every single time. But then we had the whole COVID season, and the Shala didn't open, and people weren't able to travel and everything. And so I was really excited to get into the season there. My body was feeling good, but almost on arrival, I started to feel that I had this very painful point in the middle of my back. It was almost, a bit debilitating at times. I could basically feel it in all the movement patterns. I could feel it in twisting, I could feel it in all the forward bends, definitely the leg behind the head stuff. I could feel it walking around outside my practice. I could feel it when I went over a speed bump, that kind of thing. And the type of pain that I'm experiencing at this point is not really pertinent to the conversation that I'm trying to have with you, but just to give you guys a rough idea of what I was experiencing. I basically could only get a bit of relief from this from lying down on the floor or in certain back bends, and some of the lighter back bends were very accessible, particularly those ones at the beginning of the intermediate series. That's been well integrated for my body, and so moving through that part of the sequence felt fine. But then if I would do a very deep back bend, like final back bending, catching and things like that, that was actually the worst thing for me, for my back. And I would then start to feel it a lot of the time during the rest of the day, and I would just feel all miserable and uncomfortable and end up having to spend a lot of time lying on the floor. And I just quite quickly realized that doing that kind of movement wasn't really worth it for me. But you know, it's a difficult situation, because what do you do when you're in a place where there is quite a big culture around catching and around, you know, deep back bending, face your fears, stimulate your nervous system in a certain way, and all of that, and then to be in a position where you know your body and you know that it's not good for you to go so extreme in those movement patterns. So how do you deal with that? And my answer is a very clear one, and that it's that you should not catch. You need to back off from that type of situation. It's a strange one, because at the time I didn't really want to accept it at first, but I always tell my students that you need to practice for the body that you have on the day, and you need to learn from that body. You need to take it the way that it is, accept it, and work with it and learn from it. And while I was practicing in this situation initially, I just really wanted to kind of practice for the body that I had last week, or just the body that I wanted to have. So I didn't really like the idea of backing it off for a couple of days, but it only, you know, it was so bad that it only took me like a day or two to realize that it needs to be accepted and worked with. And so I took the opportunity to speak to my teacher about it. Sharathji handled it absolutely perfectly for me, and the way that he handled it was to not catastrophize about it at all. So the fact that he wasn't catastrophizing about it put me at a lot of ease as well. And you know, it's always a little bit concerning if you explain it and then the answer is like, oh, that's going to take a long time, you're going to have to work with it, dial it back for ages, and then we'll reassess in, you know, 6 to 8 weeks. And it wasn't like that at all. He just basically gave me the space and time to explore and experience my body. I think that he knows that I know my body and I know the practice very well. And I really appreciated the fact that I had this space and time and freedom to explore my sequence the way that it was appropriate for me at the time. And so what I did was I dialed it way back. I was supposed to be going straight into the third series and doing a whole bunch of advanced asanas on a day-to-day basis. I just did the primary series for a little while. I very quickly managed to build it to doing the full intermediate series, and from there I just very gradually started to add back the postures that I learned from the third series one by one, and I felt the complete freedom to add them when it was appropriate for me, and even subtract them if that was appropriate for me. And I felt that being allowed to practice in that way in the Shala really showed a great sense of trust from my teacher, that he, you know, believed that I am capable enough to work through my sequence on my own, and that I will always do my best. So I was never pushed. I was never made to do more than what I comfortably wanted to do on any day. And I was never adjusted in a way that took me deeper into any of the postures, not by Sharathji, not by any of the assistants. And the adjustments that I received were always just supportive ones that make the posture feel more stable and more comfortable for me, not to kind of change my body or to push the limits of what my body was capable of at that time. And so I was there for a full 3-month season. The first part of it was very much dominated by me practicing with awareness that I've got this point of discomfort in my back. The second part, I kind of transitioned into a feeling of complete freedom in my body. At this point, I wasn't feeling my back at all. I was able to do all the movement patterns that I wanted to do. I was able to do deep back bending, high catch, do all the postures from the third series, all the movement patterns that I wanted to do. I was able to advance further into the sequence than I'd learned before. And I found the trip to be so much deeper and richer and more rewarding, because I was able to go through this kind of transformative experience. And you know, I didn't just get there and was already able to do everything. So I find it really, really rewarding to go through moments of struggle and moments of learning, and to have to use Mysore as a place of healing, which I've had to do on many occasions. But you know, it's always very rewarding, and it gives you the opportunity to learn a whole lot of new stuff about your body, your mind, your mentality, and everything. And I think that's really a big part of the reason why we do the practice. It should not come effortlessly. And so I just wanted to make it clear that practicing in Mysore presents support in many, many different ways. It's not just one thing. It's not one size fits all. And I suppose it's very important to communicate this with students who are going to Mysore. Maybe you're even there now, because this has been kind of an interesting season. We had the full 3 months of summer when I was there, then they took a few weeks off, and now they're straight back into the winter season, and there's a new group of students that are doing their season there now. And so I want to make it really clear to the students that are there that you don't always have to be making progress. You don't always have to think, wow, I did some really crazy superhuman stuff last season, and now I need to be there ready to do it at that level, if not better. It's not always like that. There are a huge variety of bodies that go in there and practice in the Shala in Mysore. People come from all different backgrounds. There are people who are very old, very pregnant. We've got all sorts of ailments and illnesses and arthritis and all sorts of different things, and they all receive the support that they need when practicing in Mysore. And people should feel more comfortable to practice in a way that is appropriate for them, even when the plan was to go through this peaking phase of your practice cycle. And I know that it can be a little bit disappointing, because you kind of want to be at the top of your game all the time, but the fact is that you're just not. There are times when you need to dial it back, and doing exactly that is ultimately going to lead you to a place that is more rewarding than just being able to do everything all the time. So then another group of people that I'd kind of like to address as well is those that are curious about going to Mysore but aren't going. And it's very common that I'll hear people saying, I'm really interested in going to Mysore, but maybe only after I've learned a bit more of the sequence, or maybe when I'm not injured, or maybe when this is not the case and that's not the case. Ultimately, something that's really good to keep in mind, not just about going and practicing in the Shala, but about India in general, and maybe even about life, but especially about India, is that when you go, you've got to go with this mentality of just being open, having not a lot of expectations. You can't really plan everything meticulously down to a T. You can't know exactly how you're going to get from the airport to your accommodation and have paid for everything in advance and have people on the ground organizing you this and that. Ultimately, things are going to fall through, and it's going to throw a massive spanner in the works. If you have that kind of level of expectation and like planning everything so meticulously, you will be disappointed by the experience. Whereas if you just go there open and ready to experience every day for what it is and make the best of it, invariably that will lead you to having a much deeper and richer and more rewarding experience than you will have ever been able to conjure up in your mind's eye before your trip started. So that openness is a really important part of it, and having the expectation that everything should go perfectly, it's just not realistic. It's definitely not realistic for India, because things are unpredictable and chaotic in a way that you might not be familiar with if you haven't been there before. And you're going to need to learn to adapt on the fly. And once you learn to adapt on the fly, it is really incredible and really, really rewarding to do. And then finally, for those people that aren't going to Mysore, they've never been before, maybe you are even against the idea of going to Mysore, that's totally fine. Each to their own. I think that if you have no interest in going to Mysore, then definitely don't go, because there are a lot of people queuing up for the spots that are available there. And I'm definitely not going to try and change your mind in this little conversation, but I do think that it's worth acknowledging and respecting the fact that a lot of people go there and have this experience that I'm describing for you. It's not one size fits all. It's not dogmatic. It's not aggressive adjustments. It's not pushing people through the sequence faster than they are willing to go. Mysore is an incredibly supportive environment for many, many different people to practice in. And there are hundreds of people that go there every year that have the experience that I'm describing for you today. And I think that it is really worth just respecting the fact that it is deeply rewarding for a huge variety of people, even if that might not be yourself. All right, so I suppose I'll leave it at that for today, because it's getting really dark and I should probably start going in. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching all of this video, and I am really grateful to all the people that send me such sweet messages, and all the incredible people that I met on this last trip to Mysore. A lot of them that I've never met before, but they recognize me, they know some of the work that I'm doing, making these little videos and things, and it's always being so well received and so well appreciated. And so I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you in return. Feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. It would be an honor for me to welcome you into this community, and take care of your nice selves. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.